You're listening to a bonus episode of The Dairy Age featuring Teagasc's weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also available as a podcast.
Good morning, everybody. You're very welcome to our final Let's Talk Dairy webinar for 2022. Have to be careful the year now, Joe. Don't get the year wrong and show me age. On a cold and frosty morning. It's very cold down here in County Carlow anyway. What's it like up in Monaghan, Joe? Or Grange, wherever you are today?
It's Arctic, George, as expected, but sure, we're well used to it. We're not worried too much.
We're giving people the option anyway of sitting in for a few minutes out of the cold and hear what's going on, I hope. Soon they're on the laptop or the mobile in an office somewhere in a shelter in the house.
I think there's a lot of cows been dried off this week, George, where lads thought they were going to milk through our side, and you know what, it's not worth it. So
been setting me more than once this week.
Yeah, I think so.
You know what? I think they're probably right. It's all about money. Joe, tell us about Joe's just for the listeners here this morning. Joe's my immediate boss. He's head of Dairy KT in Teagasc, and he was kind of organising the National Dairy Conference in 2022. And I thought it would be an opportunity for us to invite Joe on, maybe for those of you that did attend and maybe for those of you that didn't attend, just to hear a little bit, Joe, about the dairy conference that took place, a very successful pair of dairy conferences that took place last week, one in Cork on Tuesday and the second in Mullingar on Thursday. So maybe just bring us through the kind of broad outline of what happened, Joe. We'll focus in then on one or two of the sessions.
So we as you say, we were in Rochestown on the Tuesday and in the Mullingar Park on Thursday. Good crowds and good enthusiasm in both locations, it must be said. And what we want is plenty of dairy farmers and plenty of people that are in the trenches, so to speak. So we got that, which we're very happy with. And I suppose, look, it's really it's down to the quality of speakers that were there that people came along to hear, and I think that's an important point too. So look at, I suppose before we get into the detail on it, I think certainly just to mention, like we did have, we had two farmer speakers on both days. We had Liam Long and Michael Gowan on the first day, and Sean O'Donnell and Peter on the second day. And you know, it's a very important thing to have, you know, the voice from people that are practicing what's been talked about. So just to reiterate, thanks to those four guys for their contribution on the day. But anyway, look at where did we go on the day? I suppose we opened with where the market's looking at and what the market's demanded in terms of its evolving product demand. We had speakers from Dairygold and from Teagasc as well on that one. So look, obviously market's been positive. Some discussion around maybe that'll soften a little bit for next year. But one of the main points maybe to come out through the first day certainly was that maybe that the set point from where we talk about the long-term average might be higher going into the future than what we're used to. So when we used to talk about 30, it's more like 40, if you like, not putting a specific figure on it. But that was the discussion on the day, that maybe that set point might be higher. But one of the really interesting talks was from the Food Safety Authority, actually from Dr. Mary Flynn and from Una Lyons in Mullingar, and they really did a good job to show the difference. I think it was an interesting comparison between the quality, the nutrition quality of milk versus a lot of the alternatives that are being marketed and spoken about at the moment. And really what you could see there was that the big things like calcium and protein in dairy products proper, dairy products proper, I suppose, they were 4 or 5 times richer in terms of their protein content than some of the alternatives, maybe 10 times richer in some cases. So it just put that thing in context that we do have a very high quality product. The Food Safety Authority were very strong on the need for that to be part of diets in early life through teenage years and also into older age as well. So there was a good reassurance, I think, from the crowd there to hear that what they're producing every day is very valuable and is valued, and that was an important session. So I think there were a lot of iPhones taking snapshots of the comparison chart, George, because it did stand out, and even people ourselves that are working in the industry practically all our lives were maybe surprised by some of the comparison. And I think it's very important, I think, that the dairy farmers have that knowledge that they know what their product is relative to the alternatives. You know what I'm
I
saying?
just couldn't believe how watery the stuff is, Joe. It's brutal altogether.
Sugary water, yeah.
And
That's
people
that's
say,
another day, and people say, look,
sure, they won't say that exactly.
They won't say that. But look, I think we were very clear on that, though. We didn't bring in an advocate from the dairy industry. We brought in people that are from a very objective measure on it, and there was no. We asked for an objective look at where dairy products fit in, and that's what we got. And it wasn't from an advocacy group or from a lobby group. It was from the state scientific body responsible for this stuff, and that's what we got back. And I think that's the important point of that.
Tell us about session 2 then, Joe.
Look, at session 2, obviously nitrogen and clover have been big on the agenda over the last on farm over the last 12 to 24 months, maybe longer than that from a research point of view. Okay. And I think one of the main things that came from that, and Siobhan Kavanagh from the Signpost program was very strong on this, that, we wanted to get the point out, and I think the point was well made, that the nitrogen story is not just a water quality story or a cost story. It's also a story around greenhouse gas emissions as well. And that, reduction in chemical N and change in nitrogen type are the first and biggest thing we can do in the short term to mitigate greenhouse gases. I think sometimes the whole discussion tends to be around methane output, and that kind of stuff gets the media attention. But from a farm point of view, what can you do next year to reduce greenhouse gases? It's reduce the level of nitrogen in the system, in chemical N in the system, but also change the type towards protected urea. That was a very clear message. Now look at the other thing to say too, and Deirdre Hennessy was very strong about this, that we can't just drop out nitrogen out of the system and expect the thing to go ahead. There's a 15 to 20 to 1 return in terms of growth rate, depending on the time of year, on your nitrogen. So the nitrogen in the bag has worked and does work. It just comes with too high of a footprint. So obviously clover has to come in there and make the difference in terms of fixing the chemical N. So and I think Deirdre was very strong about this. We shouldn't say there's a figure. We can't say it replaces 100 kilos of N or it replaces 200 kilos of N or 50. Yeah. It really depends on what's there on the farm. But typically, what was the figure? About 80 to 100 kilos is typically what it could replace. Exactly. And that's, and that's where we're kind of looking at I know some people and there's good research being done in Teagasc as well on zero-end systems and high-end systems and all sorts of systems. But the target, I suppose, for farmers at the moment is kind of that 150 plus 100 coming from clover is kind of what we'll be talking about. And that came through the talk as well,
Okay.
So look, I just don't want a quick one on that. Like Mike Deneen did a nice job outlining the fact that clover as a plant and clover swords do have good nutritional benefits to dairy cows as well. And he was very good on that in terms of how the fiber levels in the clover swords are lower, and that should get better production as a result. Yeah.
Okay. Bring us on to session 3 then, Joe, about the quality calves of the dairy herd.
Quality calves, yeah. Look, it's back to the future on this one, really, isn't it? Really, that we're maybe going back to a system. Maybe it's a new system, maybe it's an old system of breeding a fixed number of dairy replacements and then trying to maximize the quality of beef in the remaining calves. I mean, there was plenty of people did that for years through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I suppose. And then I suppose as quotas went out, we did build cow numbers and build heifer numbers came through. There was a very strong focus on the dairy side and maybe less so on the beef. So that might change back a little bit now as herds, not only are herds stabilizing, George, but you see this yourself, obviously, with your groups. The days of 20% empty are over on a lot of farms. So we don't have the replacement rate requirements that we would have had previously when fertility in the herd was low. So actually, probably high EBI has contributed to the fact that we probably can get away with using a lot less dairy straws. And you put sex semen on top of that again, there is space there to do something on beef, I would say, So look, Alan Toomey from Moore Park and Ross Evans in Mullingar from ICBF just laid out, look, the system there of choosing bulls with the dairy beef index, being a bit more detailed about it, not just looking at calving difficulty, but looking at the carcass traits as well. That does it does offer opportunities for people to just produce a better quality calf that leaves the people rearing those calves with a better opportunity to make a margin on them. But look, at one of the questions maybe that came from the floor on that one was really around, can you have a dairy herd that's so low in beef genetics that it's not even worth your while doing this? And that's a tricky one. Like, I mean, if you're looking at, typically maybe what's the average, -8 or -9 or something in around that for beef marriage.
Exactly.
Yeah. What if you're -20 or -25? Is it a waste of time even trying this? And I think Ross was very strong on that in Mullingar, actually, that you can have good bulls with good calving traits that can also put a bit of beef merit into even cows at that lower level. But you do need to be probably up at 70, 80 on the beef merit side of things to make that happen. So it's not a lost cause for those herds by any means. And that was an important message too.
I suppose the challenge there is to get a team of bulls coming through the system that will meet those needs. It reminds me of the early days. Yeah, it reminds me of the early days in the EBI, Joe, when we were looking for milk and fertility, and it's hard to get the two of them. Hopefully it'll come in the next number of years. It'll be there, I'm sure.
I know the list is full. The list is the active bull list from the dairy side, George, is full of those bulls now.
It is.
Like, I mean, you've looked at the lists on the DBI at the moment. There are some bulls available like that, aren't there?
Yeah, there's a limited number that'll meet most of the criteria at this stage, which I suppose it'll be a few years, to be honest, about it now because the selection is only starting really to get the bigger teams of bulls that we really need to drive this on. Joe, tell us a bit about this.
I just one final point before we move off that. Like, and I mean, the two farmers, Liam and Peter, were strong on this too. That like we there was a relatively positive reception to the messages around that. Like, it wasn't. I think maybe the fact that now there are tools coming available for dairy farmers to use on the breeding side is maybe that was missing previously. If it's possibly now. There's a direction that can go in, and there's things people can do to make a difference. And I felt that there was a good reception towards that, because difficult enough subject, to be fair, previously when maybe the tools weren't available to use. But now there are options there, and I think people, as a result, maybe have responded to that in the way the viewer to think about this thing. So that's good. That's good.
Bring us through the fourth session then, Joe. Some kind of short pieces then.
Yeah, look, on the short stuff, we asked. I think it's one thing I know we talked a lot about it ourselves internally, George, around the need to have. I like to think that attendees can go home with something practical to look at after the conference. That there's something you can go. That it's not all pie in the sky stuff. That you have some reasonable take home stuff. And we says, look, at the graveyard shift is the time for that, because lads will be getting itchy to move on at that after 3 o'clock or whatever. So we asked for 4 things. Was really look at the costs. We wanted something on cell count, something on methane, which is important, even though we said, look, nitrogen's the main story for the moment, and also John Upton stuff on milking facilities and that, which was interesting. Those were the four things, So
I think you pull a few slides.
Just for a quick peek at that. So maybe just James and Adrian O'Callaghan and Patrick pulled this together for the cost side of things. And look, not to get into too much detail, but the main point just on the slide, if you look at the blue box there, that's the kind of the average and the range of cost you would have seen in 21, I suppose. So you can see the average cost being something around sort of 1,560 to 1,600 quid, and then on the yellow or the orange box there is the sort of the average and the range that's likely to happen for the final tally in 2022. I suppose, look, the nice show. There's 2 important things to show there. Number one is that the average in 2022 will be even higher or slightly higher than what the highest cost farm was in 2021. So on average, our average cost now is as high as what the highest cost farms were last year. And that's, because all the talk is about milk price, but we also have to just watch this question on cost is important. The 5-year gross output average was just thrown in there as well for comparison. And you could see that really that the average cost in 2022 will be the same or even slightly coming close to what the 5-year average for gross output was. Just highlighting that while it's been a very good year for dairy farmers, that's driven on price, and the risk of high cost in the background needs to be factored into people's thinking, and it needs to be managed rather than thinking, I suppose we don't want to be the prophets of doom here, and we have absolutely no impact whatsoever, no role at all in where milk price goes. All we can do is try and put the figures in front of people, and that's what it shows there, is that be careful, because with the acceleration in cost, we become very reliant on the high price. We really become very, very reliant on the high price to make the margin. Okay. So look at one other quick thing that he had there was, or that the lads had, was it's just this idea that the cost for all cows isn't created equally, that the cows you have now have a certain cost, but if you drive on numbers to respond to high milk price, it's likely that the cost of the marginal cows or the additional cows will be higher than the average cost you have at the moment, because a lot of the time that's based on bought-in feed. So James and Adrian just showed that for 10, we'll not go into the detail here because we don't have time, but for 10 extra cows, right, at current costs, it'll cost you 20 grand extra in feed cost to carry 10 extra cows. So you might be there thinking, as a dairy farmer, you're thinking, I'm feeding whatever, a ton of concentrate, for example, and I'm feeding my 100 cows and I'm buying a ton of concentrate. It's costing me around 40 grand to feed in purchase feed. 10 extra cows will increase your feed cost by 50% this year. And that's important to remember. Now, there could depend on the type of cow, there could be still a margin in those, but don't expect the cost to stay. It's not line for line or cow by cow. They're going to accelerate, so you have to be careful on your numbers. And that was the main point there, which I thought was interesting. Look at on the milk and efficiency. Where did John go with that? John Upton. Big point here really is, look at cows per hour. You're talking 90 on your herringbone on the left, but 95 cows per hour. 170 on the rotaries, but huge farm-to-farm variation. So operator, we can't change our milking parlour in the morning, but we can have a look at our operating system or our way of doing things. And John made a very good point, actually, that it's not just the parlour, but it's also the collecting yards, the drafting, the exit from the parlour. Collecting yards are a major problem on a lot of farms. They contribute hugely to milking efficiency. And he could see from his data that the poorest performing parlours were taking much longer to load rows and to empty rows. It's not only about how quickly clusters are attached. It's really, in a herringbone situation, it's how quickly the animals enter and leave the parlour. And, rather than focusing on, extra kit inside in the parlour, which is important too, maybe having a look at how the whole thing is configured in the yard might be as an important thing to look at. So look at one other thing that he made a nice point was, and this is, we'll not delay on this one, but in a herringbone system, one operator was giving you 88 cows an hour, two operators on average, and two operators was giving you 105.
So kick that out of the parlour is a message, Joe, is it?
Yeah, except on Sunday morning, George. That was, So, but it's an interesting one. Like that, a lot of these farms actually, we have two people milking, and we have a labour shortage on farms. So John's message was set the farm up, or set the parlour up, particularly in the herringbone. Set it up with a good draft and good cow flow, good automation that allows one person to sort of milk in comfort. But a lot of the times we have 1.5 people or 2 people floating around, a second person floating around to get over the fact that the thing isn't as well set up as it should be. And that's it's this kind of intergenerational thing. Who's milking? We both are, kind of a thing, and that's fair enough. But look at try and give one or the other the evening off or whatever if possible. One other quick one on it, and I'll not dwell on it, George. This is an interesting one. The 16-8, this 8-16 is 8 hours and 16 hours between milkings. Only 20% of rotaries and only 6% of herringbone farms in the study were milking at that optimal interval from a labour management point of view. So while you have all this kit and all the focus is on the milking process, we're still stuck with the idea that a lot of people aren't milking, they're milking at a 10-hour interval. So a 2-hour milking on top of a 10-hour interval means that on average farms are running a 12-hour day.
Yeah.
That could be a 10-hour day in the
When there's
morning.
no need.
When there's no need. There is no need. There is
That's
no
the core
need.
message there.
So that was a big one. Right, look at quickly, Pablo on selective dry cow. A couple of quick things here from Pablo. And, anyone that wants the detail on this, the presentations and the papers are up online. And I think we should invite some of these guys on to have a chat in the new year as well, or maybe later next year when these are interesting. But look at one big thing he said, look at, there's a variation, and it's no point in saying otherwise. The antibiotic is in blue, teat sealant and antibiotic is in, these are herd by herd. You can look at the variation in the responses to dry cow therapy. The antibiotic is kind of, the range between herds is much less. Some herds had a bad outcome with the teat sealant only, and some herds were very, very comparable and very good. And it's these cases that fall down are the ones that are of concern. Right. So like you can see the antibiotic is doing what you'd expect. It's equalizing management. It's a kind of I'm not going to say an aid to bad management, but sort of it brings everyone onto a level playing field. The challenge is higher, obviously, when you've got a selective program in place, but some herds had very good outcomes from it, right? That's important. So look at, what did he say? You need to be using CMT during the lactation, really, for low mastitis. Records are important, obviously. Stripping cow's milk, certainly if there's finding cases quickly and promptly, all very important, right? On the dry period, interesting one, a cubicle per cow or more needed. There's 30,000 or more of a cell count difference. Packed sheds or poorly appointed sheds are a risk for a whole lactation cell count. Clean your cubicles twice a day, even during the dry period, which was an interesting one. There was bit of grumbling about that, but there you go. That's 40,000 of a cell count. Yeah, that's the finding. So get in there and keep them clean even during the dry period was an important one. This was a big one for me, actually. I thought was interesting. 29% of heifers calving in had infections. That's interesting now. So Pablo made a good point here that actually heifers are seen as a clean animal coming into the herd. But actually, there can be a reservoir of mastitis infection, actually, because they don't get the attention maybe that the cow that you have records on does. So the heifers are one. So training heifers into cubicles, making sure that they're lying up, that they're clean, all that kind of stuff. Bringing heifers home in good time from contract rearing arrangements, that they're not unsettled or not cubicle trained. Coming into the spring period is important. That was a big one, actually. Last milk recording before, getting a good milk recording done at 30 days before dry off, very good predictor of infection. And another big one here was for heifers, cut-off point for selective 60,000, for cows 100,000. So you need actually a heifer at 100,000 cell count could have an infection, but just doesn't show it. So make the cut point 60 for your heifers, and that was interesting. Okay, so look at, we've covered all those, and clean cubicles is a big one. I'll just skip to what Ben talked about, and very quickly, Ben talked about measuring methane through the green feed. You can see here the green feed system, that this little tower, when the cow eats she's only eating a couple of bits of concentrate every day, a few times a day. It measures the methane in her breath, and that's the calculation on methane is a book value, and you can see the book value is in orange here, but when they measured it in pasture, you can show that there's about an 18% drop in methane production on high quality pasture at the start of the year. So actually the book value for methane that's assumed for Irish dairy cows is too high, and the idea now will be to try and get the measured value included in the inventory. And that's a very repeatable and very consistent message across a good number of trials at this stage. And, that's data that's been checked in other countries and all the rest of it. And it's a good story. And the story really here is around low fiber, high quality pasture in the start of the year creates less methane than is assumed. But as you can see, as you move through the year and the quality of pasture, the fiber content in the pasture comes up, it actually comes back to what you'd expect it to be. But look, we produce a lot of milk in here, and it's telling us that we're overestimating what methane is produced, which is a good news story really for a pasture system. All right.
Joe, listen, that's a whistle-stop tour of the dairy conference there. There's only one question in. If anyone else, just before we go, has a question to ask, just fire ahead and ask it. And the question is a kind of a complaint here, Joe. Why was the conference not available via Zoom? From Wexford to Cork, it's a 5.5 hour drive and a 4.5 hour trip to Mullingar. I suppose we're kind of spoiled in a way. I suppose we were anxious to get back to a face-to-face conference, Joe, after 3 years. There's nothing like the face-to-face event. But a lot of the material that you presented or that there now is available online already. And there's a PDF.
They're recorded. Yeah, there's the nitrogen session and the calf session are recorded. They're recorded and they're online as well. Yeah.
They're online as well. So not all of it, but some of the material that's available or that was presented is available online, and there'll be slides and the booklet available on the system as well if you go looking for it. If you're in trouble, just drop me an email and I'll get it on to you. So listen, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave it at that for today. I thank Joe for our whistle-stop tour through the dairy conference. It was great. Thanks, Joe. We're starting up again. We won't have any Let's Talk Dairy webinar next week. We'll start up again on the 5th of January. And for the month of January, I have me speakers lined up. We're going to go through some of the content of the calf care events that take place during January. January is an important time to get ready and get your head in gear for the calf rearing that will take place across the spring. So we'll cover that in January in the Let's Talk Dairy on the 5th, the 12th, 19th and 26th. Without any further ado, I thank Joe once more. Thank you, our audience, for sitting in with us. And we'll see you all again, please God, in the new year. And happy Christmas and a prosperous new year.
That's all for this week's bonus episode from the Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, and don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with the usual Dairy Age podcast on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Stuart Childs, and thanks for listening.